Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining this session. And I'd like to start by telling a story. And oddly, on a session around customer experience, this is a story about MRI scanners. And it's a story about a chap called Doug Dietz, who was a project manager for GE Healthcare, and he had a project to design a new MRI scanner, and that's the result of the project that you see up on the wall. And the project was a real success. It was on time, it was under budget, the scanner was really efficient, and he thought, fantastic, I want to go and see this scanner in operation in a hospital. So he went along to a hospital where the scanner was being used, was walking down the corridor to the room, and walking the other way was a family, two parents and a young girl around 7. And the young girl was really upset, almost hysterical, crying, and the parents were trying to console her, saying that you can be brave, you can get through this, it will be okay. Because she was so nervous about going into the scan, which is common with children, and the doctors and nurses saw this and instantly called for sedation, because they knew they'd have to put the little girl to sleep to have the scan. Now Doug was horrified by that, really, because to all intents and purposes he felt he had delivered a fantastic project. But when he looked at it through the eyes of his customers, he realized that actually it didn't deliver for their needs. So he went away and he got his team working on it and thinking about what he could do to make it a better experience for those children. And what they came up with is things like this. So this is one of the new designs that they put in place. And it wasn't just a lick of paint. There was a whole story that goes along with it. So the blue kind of river that you can see on the floor, that goes all the way out into the corridor. The technicians and the doctors and nurses are given a script, and that includes things like, on this one, you lie down on the canoe and we'll strap you in so you're really tight, and if you stay really still, the fish will jump out of the water and jump over your canoe. Because if you look on the right, the bit that spins round, that's got the kind of prints of the fish on. And they also did space rockets, that the banging of the MRI machine was the spaceship going into hyperspace. And it was amazing. And the upshot of this, the results of it were that patient satisfaction went up by 92%. And on the old MRI scanner, sedation of children was about 80%, and it dropped down to single digits within the first 2 years of the new scanners. So why am I telling you that on a talk about customer experience? Well, it's about the process. And what I mean by that is the process for an MRI scanner is, does it take pictures that inside the body that are clear and crisp, that allow doctors to diagnose conditions? That's the process. But just following the process didn't deliver for the customer. What Doug had to do was go beyond the process. And that's my view always on customer experience, but particularly now. We're all faced, in whatever sector we're in, with various challenges, and there's new processes that we're having to put together all of the time. There's advice for the government, there's so much out there that we have to do to make it safe for customers to interact with us. We've got the working from home situation as well. But I believe that the businesses that really thrive beyond the current crisis are those that go beyond the process. And one of the best examples I've seen of people going beyond the process through the current COVID crisis, keeping with a medical theme, are people like this. So the process for a doctor or a nurse working in a COVID ward in a hospital is you wear full PPE to stop stop you catching the disease and to stop the spread. But actually, if you wear full PPE, what does it mean? It means that your patient, who is scared, vulnerable, can't see the face of the person that's treating them. They can't see whether they're smiling or not. So these guys, and I'm sure you've seen the pictures, these guys put pictures of themselves onto their PPE to show the patients who it was that was treating them, and to really help customers, that patients are customers, to help those customers that are in that really vulnerable situation. Because key and crucial at the moment is around emotion. The crisis situation that we're all in, and we're all facing different things, heightens our levels of anxiety. The study shows that 57% of people are reporting increased anxiety during the current situation. And just to build on that, I'd really encourage you just to ask yourself a couple of questions. The first question is, how have you felt as a customer during the last 10 weeks? When you've gone into a supermarket, when you've had to phone up your bank, what emotions has that triggered within you? And a second one to think about, which is quite personal to me at the moment, is when Boris stood up on stage and said, we're going to send the children back to school. How did that make you feel? So for me, I have two boys, Sam and Jake. Jake's in year 1 and he's due to go back to school tomorrow. Sorry, not tomorrow, next Monday. And even in our household, between myself and my wife, we have different views on that. And, I think it makes sense to go back, and the risk is so small. My wife, Katie, thinks there's a real risk. He has asthma and she's really fearful around what will happen. And yes, that's not what we might think of as a true customer interaction, but it does show how we are all feeling and how we're all feeling differently about how we return to normality in life. And as we bring it more back towards customer, I'm going to talk about something called Net Promoter Score, which many of you will use in your business, many of you will know about, and some of you may not have come across it within your business. But if you haven't come across it within your business, then I'm sure you've used it as a customer. Basically how it works is you will get a text or an email that says, on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this business to a friend or family? And I'll just run through really quickly how it works. So a 0 to 6 score is what we call a detractor. That is where people will say negative things about your business. And at the moment, that is happening when businesses aren't making customers feel safe, when they aren't giving the confidence for people to return. That's the absolute basic that we need to do. That's the minimum that we need to be doing now in whatever sector you work in, is giving that confidence that people are safe to return. The second, the 7 to 8, is what we call passive. And currently that would be, yep, you've given me confidence that it's safe to return. You've done what it says on the tin. You've hit my expectations, but nothing more. But the real power comes in 9s and 10s, which is what we call the promoters. Now, they're the people that a business is connected with on an emotional level. They're your raving fans, the people that will say, you have to go there, you have to phone this business because of X, Y, and Z. They're your free marketing. And give a story to demonstrate Net Promoter Score and in the current situation is, now I live in Bicester. If you know Bicester, there's 2 main supermarkets. There's a Tesco's and there's a Sainsbury's. And for the first probably 3 or 4 weeks of the crisis and the lockdown, Tesco's did an exceptional job. The queues were clear, the communication was clear, they had teams wiping trolleys, wiping baskets, social distancing was enforced, one-way systems around the store. And it was a fantastic job. But actually, Sainsbury's didn't. And they didn't get on board for about 3 weeks. And if you went into Sainsbury's in that first period of time, there was none of that control. It felt chaotic. There was no one cleaning, basket handles, etc. And it didn't feel great. And the result of that is that, particularly on social media and word of mouth around Bicester, is people have said, loyal Sainsbury's customers have said, I won't go back to that shop because they didn't make me feel safe. And they've said, I'll actually continue to be a Tesco's customer. So how we make our customers feel safe is kind of the basic at the moment. But to move up into a promoter, that's where the magic really happens. And that's around connecting on an emotional level with your customer. And that can be completely different based on whichever sector you work in. But let me just share one quick example. And we talk about, in our business, we're a customer experience business. We talk about doing something that is small, personal, and unexpected for your customers. And if you can do that, that's what will move up from a passive to a promoter. We call them the little big things. And here's an example of a little big thing that I've experienced as a customer. So I do a lot of running, silly long runs, and I use this kind of energy product called Tailwind, and I order it directly from the manufacturer because they make me feel really special. And how they do that is you fill out the order online. There's a little box in it that says, "Are you training for any race at the moment?" And I didn't really think anything of it. But then what happens is when the Tailwind drops through my letterbox, there's a handwritten note in there saying, "Welcome back, and I hope you all the best training for your race in Reading that you've got coming up," which I thought was amazing. But actually, the real magic came when the Friday before my race, I got an email from the Tailwind team just saying, "We wanted to wish you the best of luck for your race at the weekend," which is phenomenal. So my challenge to you would be to think about your business, and I'm sure you're doing lots of things like this at the moment, but actually what more can you do to really, and what can you put into your processes to make sure that you are going beyond the process and really engaging your customers to get up to those 9s and 10s. Okay. The second thing I want to talk to you about really is around communication. Communication is vital, particularly at the moment. And there's a George Bernard Shaw quote around the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that has ever taken place. Sometimes we put a message on our website, we write a sign, we send an email to our teams, and we think we've done enough to communicate, but we haven't actually engaged. And crucially at the moment, for me, that's around empathy. We've done some research over the last 10 weeks into websites. We've done one study into the legal sector, and we found that the vast majority of law firm websites didn't display any empathy around the COVID-19 situation. And actually, the 36% that did, their net promoter score was plus 50 above those that didn't. So I would encourage you, your website is particularly at the moment, it's often the first place where your prospective customers will go to. So go back, have a look at it. Have you got the tone right? Are you displaying empathy for your customers in the current situation? And if you're not, I'd encourage you to have a look at what you can do around that. Second piece is around when your team and your customers are coming back, if they haven't already. And yep, you can put a list of what you've changed process-wise on your website, but there's great examples out there. If people know Bicester, there's a little independent coffee house called Filter. They filmed a video, which they posted out on social media and on their website, which shows all the steps that people will go through when the customer journey, when they interact with that business, which is phenomenal. And also on communication, back to the nurses and doctors and their PPE. If you're having to wear masks to interact with your customers or your team, then remember that you can't see a smile through a mask. So dialing up the other areas of body language, of tone of voice, of the words that you use to really get your message across in the right way is something really to think about. And also what happens when a customer contacts your business by phone. So many of you will have teams working from home, you'll be working from home, dealing with family, so call times may be, response times may be reduced. But if someone emails you as well, what happens to that? So if someone sends you an email, how quickly do you respond? I'll tell a quick story about that. So I talked about my boys earlier, Sam and Jake. So Sam is 9 and Sam's autistic. And last year we wanted to get some support for him, some private support. And my wife emailed 4 businesses in Oxford that deal with this kind of situation. And 1 business didn't reply. 2 businesses replied via email with a copy and paste email that they'd made a bit personal with a top and tail to that template. And the 4th phoned up my wife very promptly, had a really good conversation about my son and his needs and how she could support. And who do you think that we went with? Clearly we went with that last person who made the time and effort to make a call. So I'd encourage you to, if you do get an email in and there is a phone number in it, pick up the phone to that customer. It's far easier to build a personal connection, to create that rapport. And actually most of your competition won't be doing it. So it's a really good way to stand out. Okay, the final piece I'd like to talk to you about is around feedback. Now, in insight6, we like to call feedback the breakfast of champions. And it's quite simple, really, in that how do you know if you're delivering for your team and or your customers if you don't ask them? Particularly at the moment when things are changing at such a pace, getting regular feedback from your team and your customers is so important to identifying what their needs are and whether you're delivering their needs or whether you're exceeding their needs or even falling below. And include staff in that, because actually I feel they are your most important customer, particularly at the moment. And you know, there's been over 5,000 people that have contacted the health and safety executive over the last 2 months to flag concerns over COVID-19. So we all have a duty of care to our employees to make sure they're safe. We don't clearly want bad press or negative press around us when we get those things wrong. So ask them regularly, your team and your customers. It allows you to spot any issues before they become big issues and you can deal with them. And you know, I don't know if I'll have a list of everyone that's been on this session, but normally when I do a talk, I ask for feedback on email afterwards. So if I can, I'll send you a link to give some feedback because it is really important to us. If I can't, then please do drop me a note. My contact details are in the chat on the right-hand side. Any feedback on this session would be absolutely amazing. The final bit on feedback is just around perception. It is your customers and your team's perception that is most important. And to give an example of that, if I hit end on this webinar in about 5 minutes time, walk around my house and think, I nailed that. That was amazing. Absolutely brilliant. Got all my points across, went really well. I think I've delivered a fantastic webinar. If you get off this webinar and think, didn't really get a lot from that, didn't give me what I was expecting, didn't help me with my customer experience in any way, it doesn't matter that I think I've been great. What matters is you as my customers today, I haven't delivered what you need. So that feedback is really, really important, and that focus on perception. So I'm conscious of time, so I'll open it up to questions shortly if there's any on the chat. But the final thing I'd like to say is just to bring it back to Doug and his MRI scanner. So after he'd made the changes, they'd put in the canoes and the spaceships, he wanted to go back and see again. And he was chatting to a parent of a little girl who just had a scan. And the girl was there and she was tugging at her mum's jacket because she wanted to talk. And she looked up and she said, "Mummy, can we come back again tomorrow?" Now that for me is the power of what can happen when you listen to feedback, when you go beyond the process and when you communicate with empathy.